On this Native Report, we highlight the uniqueness of the multiracial Indigenous experience in Alaska. And we hear from a member of the Native Two-Spirited community, as well as from a scholar about gender identity roots in Indian country.
Being Two-Spirit is at the center of everything. You know, it's who I am. So it's how I am able to speak out against issues and raise my voice as loud as I do.
Plus, an Oneida Nation language instructor shares concerns over the language being in the state of emergency. We also learn what we can do to lead healthier lives and hear from our elders.
Production for Native Report is made possible by grants from the Blandin Foundation, Anishinaabe Fund, and Alexandra Smith Fund, in support of Native American treaty rights, administered through the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation. And the generous support from viewers like Jack and Sharon Kemp.
Welcome to Native Report, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Rita Karppinen. In this episode, we're exploring those who are balancing life between two worlds. We learn more about what it's like to be multiracial in Alaska, talk with someone who identifies as two-spirited in modern times, and hear from an Oneida Nation language instructor as the language is in a state of emergency. We'll start with multiracial in Alaska. We'll meet a Black Yupik musician, as well as an Athabascan Filipino family in one of the most diverse cities in the country. These are the stories of how diverse peoples are connecting with their whole identity.
Oh, man. What to do with the other hand?
I've always felt in our community, especially in Alaska, that we can do better and that there's more collective knowledge that can be shared to enhance our life, to improve our awareness and understanding of how we treat each other and how we can inform our choices to bring more love and harmony to our lives.
Unlocking the key in the melody, balance of knowledge supremacy. I war with a suffering, perfect analogy, killing and come from me.
Growing up in Bethel, there were not a lot of other Black people. I just kind of came up with this. Being so removed from Black communities, I really was reaching out to whatever I could find and connect with through music. I get so excited about representing my ancestors, honoring the long history of our Yupik family.
Oh, no, 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 no. Oh, no, 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 no. People elect, but consequence shared. It's not enough, take action now.
I'm a musician. I play with a group called Bamiwa, and we do music, dance, just performing arts. I've been doing that for about 27 years. My name is Philip Blanchette. My Yupik name is Gilichngok. My mother, my Yupik mother, Marie Mead Aganak, she was at the first generation to have mixed race relationships outside of the Yupik community. My dad was one of the first African Americans to travel to the YK Delta and to travel to the village where my mom was born and to spend time in the fish camps that are along the banks of the Kuskokwim that our family, our Yupik family, has been for generations. Everywhere I went, I was always reminded of being Black. With the kids, that was kid stuff, but it was really actually kind of sweet. What stands out, I've heard this phrase like growing up, no matter where I went with random people. Elder Native Yupik women looking at me and like, I wish I had your hair. And I was like, always, like that same phrase, no matter where I went, I was always reminded that I had curly hair, that I had these unique aspects about being black. And I thought that was really cool. I just hope my kids can be proud of who they are, understand that they'll always have that will never go away, to be able to figure out how to honor who they are and to create their own life.
My name is EJ David. I am a Filipino immigrant to Alaska. I've been living in Alaska now 28 years. I was 14 years old when I moved here. And I moved to Barrow, Alaska, or what is now Utqiagvik. I am an immigrant to this country, to these lands. I'm a guest. Alaska has one of the highest rates of multiracial people in the country. When we look at the data, especially when we look at our youth, surveys in schools and stuff, multiracial kids seem to be at highest risk for substance use, alcohol and other drugs. Multiracial kids also seem to be at highest risk for suicide ideation. You know, to me, they're more than just numbers, they're more than just statistics, because, you know, those statistics are talking about my children. I worry about that on a very real level. Us being who we are, me being Filipino is not a risk factor. My kids being Native is not a risk factor. My kids being multiracial is not a risk factor. We do our best to get them involved in both the Athabascan and Filipino communities. We want our kids to get strength from both of their communities as well.
We make food together, we go to parties together.
We go fishing, we go to our Kasilov house.
We go to powwows and we learn.
Powwows.
We learn songs, Athabascan songs.
And we
And
have a drum.
dancing.
Our kids know a lot of Tagalog words and use a lot of Tagalog words in our everyday lives. Same thing with their Athabascan side. You know, we use Sitsu for grandma. So they call my mom Lola. She's Filipino, so they call her Lola. And then they call Margaret's mom Sitsu because she's Athabascan, and that's the Athabascan word for grandma. Native games. So my kids are involved in a lot of Native games and participate in events, 2-foot high kick, 1-foot high kick, sister high jump. So they do all of that. Fishing, that's a huge part of their Athabascan culture. And not just fish, but also do everything else that comes with that. Cleaning the fish, cutting the fish, smoking it, stripping it, drying it, jarring it. You know, even Tala, who's 2, one of her roles this past fishing season was to scrape off the salmon meat off of the spine. You know, so all of that little scraps of meat from the spine, that's actually what we turn into salmon lumpia, which is a combination of, you know, traditional Native food, salmon, and then lumpia is Filipino food. Growing up, I experienced a lot of self-doubt and a lot of sense of inferiority attached to my heritage. I don't want my kids to go through that. When they think of their heritage, I want my kids to think of great things. I want them to feel pride, joy. I want them to feel strength. I want them to feel empowered when they think of both their Filipino and Athabascan cultures. That's what I want them to take away from this, is that their cultures are sources of strength, and it's what makes them special. That's what I want them to feel. It's what makes them special. It's not what makes them at higher risk for this or that. It's not what's holding them back. It's not what's putting them in danger. It's what's going to help them thrive in this world. And it's what's going to help them make this world a better place.
But he just dropped it in the road right over there. I was like, that's a pretty cool tire.
And then he started using it as weights and stuff. He started
run to me, and I'm gonna grab you and pick you up, okay? 1, 2, 3. Come on. Wow!
No,
Thank
get
you
me
for
down.
helping me. Oh, you want to get down? But what if you go up and you can see really high? You want to see what you can see? Huh?
Philip continues to work on his solo album, which will be releasing in 2022. And to learn more about the Athabascan Filipino experience, you can read EJ's book titled, We Have Not Stopped Trembling Yet, Letters to My Filipino Athabascan Family.
Go for what you want. I did. And I retired for 24 years with the state of Minnesota, where nobody around here was getting jobs. I went ahead and went out there and got it. I got on the Department of Transportation, working with the men. I was the first woman and the first native to be hired in the state of Minnesota and Brainerd for MnDOT. They can, whatever they decide they want, they can do it. You just have to set your mind. But I had a husband that helped. I told him before, because of the way the guys were acting, you know. I told him I wanted to quit at first, and he said, no, you don't want to quit. You're going to need this job sometime. So that I always remember that he was always behind me.
We're exploring and raising awareness of the Two-Spirit identity in current times. We spoke with a tribal member who identifies as a proud Two-Spirited Native to share what it means to them. We also hear from a scholar on historical mention of non-traditional gender identities in Native communities.
Being Two-Spirit is at the center of everything. You know, it's who I am. So it's how I am able to speak out against issues and raise my voice as loud as I do, because I have two very powerful spirits within me. Bonjour, Giriga Kuntz Nindijnakas. Hello, my name is Jessica Giriga Kuntz Smith. I am a Two-Spirit member of the Boys Fort Band of Minnesota Chippewa tribe. The term Two-Spirit has been a fairly new term, so it wasn't really something that I personally identified when I was younger. I define it as having a feminine and a masculine spirit. For me, that's how I identify myself, but I identify as a two-spirited woman. It differs for people. Some people think that all Native people who are LGBTQ are two-spirit, and that is not true. A lot of people think that it's simply a sexual identity, and it's not. It's a spiritual identity. My life has improved 1,000 times since I decided to go back to school. That was truly when I started my, inner healing of being a trafficking victim and survivor. Two-spirit people are vulnerable for trafficking and things like that, because a trafficker or somebody can market them to both males or females. They think, if you're LGBTQ, you can do anything, which, it's not the case. I have a 21-year-old nephew who is Two-Spirit, and I have a 15-year-old niece who is also Two-Spirit. It's truly a beautiful thing to see Two-Spirit youth really comfortable and embody who they are. Because when I was a youth, it wasn't something that I was comfortable with. And historically, it hasn't been something that was a good thing because of colonization.
We know that there are still places and families that are not very accepting and where individuals are maybe hesitant to reveal their identity or their sexual orientation. We all operate in multiple worlds in our lives. I'm Jill Dorfler. I'm a professor and the department head of American Indian Studies at the University of Minnesota, Duluth. Two-Spirit is a relatively new term. It's typically traced to 1990, to a gathering in Winnipeg. An Anishinaabe woman there sort of coined the term Nijmanadug, Two-Spirit. It's an umbrella term that can encompass many varieties of specific identities underneath of it. Historically, tribes had a lot of diversity when it came to gender identity and sexual orientation. And in the United States, part of the assimilation process was to eradicate those identities, kind of for two purposes. One, for reinforcing European American ideals of gender, sexuality, family formation, but as well as for access to resources and to destabilize Native governing structures. There were efforts on the US government's part to not allow those fluid identities, those multiple identities, to flourish in Native communities. People had to either hide their identities or sort of practice them in secret, even within tribal communities. Indian agents through the early 20th century on reservations had a huge degree of power. And so if someone was acting in a quote-unquote deviant manner, maybe in a same-sex relationship, and the Indian agent is controlling the rations that someone is dependent upon, they're not going to feel free and able to exercise their identity. They're going to practice that in secret so that they can still get their rations and survive, or that they might not experience other forms of retribution that the Indian agent might be able to exercise on them or on their family. These efforts then worked to the benefit of the US in order to gain property and resources from Native nations. I think the fluidity that existed, the many varieties of relationships and identities that Native people had, were threatening in the sense that they were seen as divergent from the European ideal system and structure and the way that laws worked. For example, property inheritance. In the US, in the early days of the American system, who could inherit property? Men. And so then we need to think about who's a man. These things are embedded and layered into law and governance, maybe without us even realizing it. Even though Two-Spirit is a relatively new term, it comes out of a historical legacy. It's a contemporary way to acknowledge and honor these practices, these identities that have been present in Indigenous communities since time immemorial. Really, for many Indigenous communities, there was an acceptance of fluidity. Traditionally, Two-Spirit people were, prior to colonization, considered sacred, because with a feminine and a masculine spirit, you're able to do ceremonial things that both a man or a woman would be able to do. So Two-Spirit people were upheld as sacred in many communities. And that's why when colonization and boarding schools and all of that happened, Two-Spirit people were hidden to be protected. Now they say that only men are supposed to be fire keepers. It's a product of colonization. I hope to see all federally recognized tribes recognize same-sex marriage. Some tribes have modified their laws to allow for same-sex marriage, and other tribes have not. And so there is a diversity in tribal nations today as far as what is officially government sanctioned and accepted and what is not. It's very hard because the process of colonization has caused all of us to some extent or another to internalize these ideas about family norms, gender identity. And so it takes a conscious effort many times to decolonize, to work on undoing that work of colonization, and that process is ongoing.
Two-spirited is more of a modern umbrella term, and there is a variety of literature available diving more into its origins and meaning. There are many two-spirited peoples of the Native community worth highlighting. From authors to artists to doctors, the list goes on and on.
Have you ever wondered about anemia? Red blood cells carry oxygen. Anemia, or low hemoglobin, is a decrease in the red blood cells. There are multiple kinds of anemia, each with its own cause, but the most common is iron deficiency anemia. Red blood cells need iron to bind oxygen, and if there aren't enough red blood cells, oxygen doesn't get to tissues, and the result is feeling weak and tired. Low red blood cells can happen for 3 reasons. Not enough are being made, the ones that are being made are being broken down, or blood cells are being lost to bleeding. Anemia can lead to other problems. If there aren't enough red blood cells that supply oxygen to tissues, the heart has to speed up to get the oxygen that is available to those tissues. That can lead to an enlarged heart or heart failure. Getting enough iron in your diet is key. Red meats, beans, green leafy vegetables, dried fruit, and other foods are good sources of iron. Your dietitian can help with that. In any event, your healthcare provider will explain things as you go and has your best interest at heart. Regular clinic visits and prevention are usually the right answer. And remember to call an elder. They've been waiting for your call. I'm Dr. Arnie Vinio, and this is Health Matters.
We take a visit to the Oneida Nation language nest, where young children are learning the Oneida language. This as the language is currently in a state of emergency. While in the classroom for the total immersion experience, there's no use of the English language.
Our curriculum is based on our ceremonial cycles. We have 2 gardens. The students pick the corn. We braided the corn. I'm Yegon Sio, or Rosa Francor. I am an instructor in the Dehadivanakla language nest. The Oneida language is currently classified in a state of emergency. Our program uses only Oneida as the sole medium of instruction. So we have 3 Oneida communities, one in New York, one in Canada, and one here. Our community here has the biggest population, but we also have the least amount of speakers. We have been removed from our homelands in New York, so that's influenced a lot of, it's influenced the decrease of our language here. There's a lot of reasons for our language being in the state that it is right now. Federal policies, Indian boarding schools. With the Oneida language being in a state of emergency, it means that it's critically endangered. It means that the speakership of our population is very, very low. We started the program 4 years ago. Our program serves students 3 to 7. We have 2 classrooms right now. We are currently in the process of expanding our program as our students age. We are working on also building an outdoor classroom to really focus on the outdoor learning, experiential education aspect of our program. Isko uska. Repetition and routine is key to immersion education. It helps them to think in our language. Whatever I teach, generally I have some type of visual that helps to assist what I'm talking about. Gestures, body movements are also really helpful to get students to learn. Basic. It's busy, but it's really fun and it goes by fast.
UW Green Bay says all Oneida Nation peoples speak English, and most know only a few expressions in Oneida. The university believes there are probably no more than a dozen native speakers of Oneida currently in Wisconsin. The Oneida Nation says every word you learn and speak becomes a part of keeping the language alive. If you missed a show or want to catch up online, find us at nativereport.org and follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram for behind-the-scenes updates. And drop a comment on social media if you enjoyed the show. Thanks for spending time with your friends and neighbors across Indian Country. I'm Rita Karppinen. We'll see you next time on Native Report.